we all can be sills in other people's lives, and we can provide those connections, those specific moments that help people pull back from that very inappropriately named honor chasm, because we need everyone here.
100 emoji.
I'm Stephen Pond.
And I'm Ben Jeppsen.
Welcome to The Next Ideal,
a Stormlight self-help podcast.
Welcome back to The Next Ideal. We today are talking about Chapter 11, Droplets, Kaladin going to the Honor Chasm. We are joined today again by Pat Carney, who is a specialist with specifically veterans in relation to suicidality. Pat, can you give us another introduction?
Yeah, sure. Again, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be able to do back-to-back episodes like this. My name is Patrick Carney. I work for the Department of Veteran Affairs here in Southern New Jersey. I co-facilitate a veteran suicide prevention program for veterans who are experiencing any kind of acute or chronic suicidality. I originally joined the Dragonsteel family when Ben and I met at 2024 Dragonsteel. And originally I was invited out to that panel through Jane Sanderson and the Lightweaver Foundation. I wanted to make sure I gave a shout out to them. They had sent us 30 copies of The Way of Kings to start our group. It was a book group for all intents and purposes, but it was also a way to use examples from the book for my veterans to identify with, and then hopefully then address with their therapists or whoever the professional is that they were working with. But I am honored to be here and just thank you again for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, we're so happy to have you here, especially for this specific chapter where Kaladin, who is functionally in the military, experiences a near suicide attempt. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about Chapter 11. We have Kaladin, who, as we talked about in the last episode, just experienced one of the lowest points in his life. Finally, after a bridge run where a young boy who reminded him of his younger brother dies, he breaks down in the barrack and cries for the first time in months. At this point, Syl has left him. She said she had to go, so Kaladin's last metaphysical lifeline has been removed, and he is in the depths of despair.
Depths of despair is well said. He's deep in the chasm. He may be at the top of the Shattered Plains right now, but he is deep in the bottom of the chasm of his life. Last episode, we talked about all these things where he seems to have no choice in his life anymore. He has no control over what's going on, and he is now alone. As we talk about Kaladin questioning his worth and the decision to end his life by suicide, there's a theory that's been developed by a clinical psychologist, Dr. Thomas Joyner, who has spent his entire career researching how people die by suicide after losing his father. He has developed a very interesting theory that has a lot of empirical support called the interpersonal theory of suicide. And that is that there are three components that develop in people that move them towards this decision. And the first is called thwarted belongingness. In other words, we feel this sense of isolation that I do not belong. Man, is that true of Kaladin?
Absolutely. I mean, Kaladin at this point is alone in a room full of people where he has a group that he belongs to. He is a bridgeman. He is specifically a part of Bridge 4, but no one cares. He's breaking down, sobbing by himself in a room full of people. And that element of being alone while being around others can be excruciating. Especially because in Kaladin's situation, he is experiencing exactly the same thing that everyone else is experiencing. They are all members of this death company. Their purpose as bridgemen is to run bridges and die. That is a shared experience, but it's a shared experience that drives people into loneliness and separation.
I think thwarted belongingness is such an apt description, because how many times the book so far have we seen Kaladin's like being thwarted, wanting to try and feel like he belongs when he was a soldier and he was a squad leader. That's taken away. That's thwarted, if you will. Looking at once he does get to the Shattered Plains, telling that one light-eyed woman I can be a spearman, I can be a soldier again, and please let me be a soldier again. And it's like, nope, you're going to the bridge crews, thwarted again. I think it's just such an apt description, and it just adds to his isolation and his every little bit he kind of gets broken down to where he is, at the bottom of that chasm.
I think you make a really good point, because every time he tries to express something about who he is punished. When he's in the slave trade and he tries to help that man, just give him water, and he witnesses the murder. When he joins the bridge crew and tries to offer some explanation of his strengths, Gaz changes his name to Lordling, right? And yep. Immediately puts him in in the worst possible position for a bridge run. Normally, brand new bridgemen don't run the first one, right? He hadn't learned anything. All of the other men who joined the crew at the same time as him, he says, you go over there, but you, Lordling, you're in this spot. You're in the death position. When he tries to come up with ideas to help protect the bridgemen, right? He gets threatened to be strung up, and he's realizing that to try and learn anybody else's name is just somebody that he's going to lose. It's almost like you are punished for trying to connect with anyone. Even if it's not an explicit punishment, you're going to lose people that you care about. And so he has nothing. And in the last chapter, we just talked about this. Syl has left. The one connection he had. Syl has left. He is alone.
The one person that knew his name is gone. And that was the only person around him whose name he knew that he could connect in some way with. I mean, he knows other people's names. He knows Gaz, but Gaz is not someone that he's able to connect with personally. Gaz is an authority figure that he knows doesn't care about him. And so there's not going to be any interpersonal connection there. So that his only source of true community was Syl, and Syl has left.
Now, Syl has left ultimately to try and help him, but he does not know that.
Right.
And it feels like abandonment. It definitely feels like abandonment. But he's so alone, right? Like, that's the thing, is he is so alone. And sometimes that is what we feel. One of the really hard things about our own emotional experience is that we have these powerful emotional experiences, and we have these thoughts that can be lies that tell us of who we are and whether people care about us. And we have them alone. And we think no one can understand what I'm going through. And that's that thwarted belongingness, that even if we have people around us that tell us they love us, in our mental state at this stage, we say, yeah, you're saying that, but I don't actually.
Yeah.
I don't actually belong here. And I don't feel any sort of real connection to anyone sufficient that I feel like I matter.
I think it's important to mention there's probably not an answer for those who have had friends. I mean, I unfortunately have more friends than fingers that have died by suicide. And it's a common thing in the military and with veterans, and it's highly, advertised. I mean, everywhere I look tends to be. It might just be because of my I can't even think of the word at the moment because I'm all choked up. The weakness side of this, it is a personal weakness, not the socially accepted weakness. I think that is so attributive to suicide. It's that I feel like I am being so weak, not maybe everyone else thinks I'm a weakling or everyone else thinks I'm weak. It's your own personal value that comes into play here. I know that was true for myself. I know that's true for many of the people I've worked with. So to be clear, I know we were talking about the strength and the weaknesses and all that. It's not so much socially acceptable. It's, am I being strong to be my best self? Am I being weak? Am I feeling like I am weak? I think it's a huge distinction to make here.
Along those lines, the second dimension of this theory is thwarted effectiveness, or more commonly, perceived burdensomeness. That's a hard word to say.
I'll fix it in post.
Thank you. One of the more common things that I will hear from people who are having thoughts of killing themselves is, it will improve other people's lives if I'm not here. That I am ineffective at helping others. And even if I feel like there are people around me that tell me they care about me, I'm hurting them by being in their lives. What a crushing thought to have. And yet there are times when I have felt that myself, where I feel like, man, I am just failing at everything I try to do. And it would be better to not try. And we see that a lot already in Kaladin, where he just lists all the people he's tried to help, and every single one of them, at least from his perspective, has been hurt by his efforts to help.
We talked about this in a previous episode. I specifically mentioned my experience when my son was born. and the postpartum depression that fathers can get, I thought for sure that any impact I had on this child's life would be negative. And the most beneficial thing that I could do as his father, as who I was at that point, was remove myself from the equation. That would be the best thing that I could possibly do. And it's a lie. It's absolutely untrue. And that's the dangerous thing about depression and suicidality, is that we tell ourselves these very enticing lies of this thing that I could do, which would be easier in some ways than sticking it out and working and trying to improve my situation and improve myself. This is an easy out. And I that's a dangerous thing to say. It's an enticing but inherently false thought that we can get so caught up in our own views of the burdens we place on others and the imposition that we are in other people's lives, that falsehood can be the only thing that we see.
I think the only thing that I would add to that is when you say easy out is a dangerous thing to say, because really there isn't anything easy about taking your own life. But when your life feels so hard, it may seem easier. Not to rush into this third dimension. We can keep talking about everything, but it leads well into the third dimension is acquired capability. And that is that when we are exposed to pain over and over and over again, we habituate to it. And that's how you overcome anxiety. That's how you overcome anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorders. We expose people to the things that are hard for them until they become used to them, so they're no longer threatened by them. But that tool that can be used for good can be used for evil on the other side, right? And when someone is exposed to pain and death over and over and over again, you become habituated to it, to the point that death by suicide seems less painful, less difficult. It's not an easy choice, but it is a less difficult choice than going on and facing this over and over and over again. And we certainly see that in Kaladin's experience. The stepping off a cliff doesn't sound that much harder than carrying a bridge on my shoulders and running straight at an army of archers.
It's one of those exponential things. It's like, well, I'm going to die anyway. Why not just do it now?
On my own terms.
Yeah, on my own terms. At least I have control of this, right? I know, and I think that's kind of what we're going into next. But soldiers in general, military in general, like I was an NCO, I was a E5, and then I got my E6 later in my career in the military, being a sergeant or a staff sergeant. I had kids joining the military at 18 years old. I'm teaching them to run into death. I was an infantryman. That was my MOS. You do basic training, and you're coming to me at 18 years old. And now I'm telling you, hey, this is how we go kill people. This is how we go, engage with the enemy. It's how we kind of make it sound nice. So I think it becomes such a more commonplace thing as well. And I think it's true for Kaladin, is death is ever present. And it honestly has been ever present for Kaladin since he was a kid, because his dad was a surgeon. And he couldn't save everybody, and he only had to care so much. So when I think you stop it for Kaladin, I think there's that crossed wire maybe where it's like, oh wait, I got to stop caring so much about me too, because I'm not really that worth that. Death is a great option. At least this way I'm not a burden on everyone else now. At least this way I'm not going to slow everyone down on the bridge crew by still being there. Better off to be dead and then get replaced. That
leads to another thing that I wanted to call out, and that is the honor chasm. The myth of the honor chasm. How did he call it? It says the honor chasm, the bridgeman called it, for it was the place where they could make the one decision left to them, the honorable decision, death. Later on at the end of the chapter, when things go better than they're looking, Gaz says, oh, you were too cowardly to go through with it, your lordship. Even like that reinforces this idea that somehow the choice to live was the cowardly one. There's been a lot of interesting research out there about cultures that reinforce this notion of honorable death by suicide, that it comes back to how habituation with anxiety, that's what we call courage, is continuing to move forward even though something's scary. And so it's easy to misinterpret this kind of an action of taking one's own life to overcome the most fundamental human instinct of self-preservation is somehow an act of courage. And how these types of cultures, particularly for men, can lead to tragic outcomes.
I remember first reading about the honor chasm, and like the first thing that flashed in my brain, and it did happen again here was thinking of the movie Last Samurai immediately, right? It is so ever present in that movie, and where the act in itself is suicide, I don't even think they think of it that way. So there is that cultural aspect of it where self-preservation, I think for those cultures though, it's that is their self-preservation, because their honor is higher above than is more important than anything else, more important than their body, than their souls, than anything. Their honor is what lives beyond them. But it's, terrible name for sure, right? Terrible name, but it's not, I don't think it's exactly untrue either. It's such a tough thing to admit, honestly. Doing what I do for work, it's like, well, if it's the one choice you got, okay, call it the honor chasm. Whatever, I can't even say whatever helps you sleep at night, because it's not going to happen either. Just the curve, and even talking about rewinding a little bit to like acute suicidality or even chronic suicidality, is that it usually happens on a curve, right? You kind of go from A and you move your way up to B. And it can be a very stark change too, where we see Kaladin on top of this chasm, and he is promptly planted at B, where he can either choose to kind of go back down to A or complete with C. And that's not really a fair even description of what that curve looks like, because usually you go from A to B, and then you have some sort of interruption, and then you're back down to C, and then it goes over again, right? But I think for descriptive purposes, it's let's get you back to A. Let's get you back to here. Let's do something that'll, Syl was trying to be that interruption between A and B for Kaladin, but he wouldn't let her in a way. His depression wouldn't let her. His self-worth wouldn't let her. His burdensomeness wouldn't let her. His social isolation wouldn't let her. And it's her delaying tactics just weren't working for him.
Talking about Gaz's response when Cal comes back, when he says too cowardly to go through with it. I remember when I attempted suicide. The reason why I didn't go through with it was because I felt I was too much of a coward. I'm not going to get into details about it because that's not important, but I was there. I was ready, and I specifically didn't go through with it because I felt I was too much of a coward to take that last step. And that is really difficult. And trying to come to terms with that label that I put on myself of the reason why I didn't is because I'm a coward has been a really hard thing to reconcile and reframe, because there's still part of that in me, right? There's still both of those elements of wanting to be done, but also being scared of that, being scared of not just what happens after, but of the act itself, being scared of it. They're still there. And trying to come to terms with both of those elements of me is tough, especially as we relate it to the thwarted belongingness and effectiveness. I feel like I had both of those. I felt like I didn't belong, and I was not effective in the actions I was trying to take. But I didn't quite have that acquired capability. And that's why I was not successful in my suicide attempt, because I wasn't habituated to pain and death. And thank goodness, because I can attest, as someone who tried to kill themselves and didn't, it gets better. Mm-hmm. It's not cowardly to do a harder thing and live.
I know it all too well myself, so I can for sure say you're absolutely right when you say it's not a cowardly thing not doing it. It takes an incredible amount of strength to come back from it.
I think it tells us that you valued life. Anxiety, when we talk about things are scary, we often speak about it in terms of a weakness. This is one of my favorite presentations to give, to talk about. I'd say that fearlessness is overrated. It's not a strength. When we feel anxiety and fear, it means something that we value is threatened. That's when we feel anxiety and fear. Even like we talk about intolerance of uncertainty. Well, we're not tolerating the uncertainty because something we value is threatened, and we're not certain how that thing that we value will turn out. And so when someone feels fear about a tough choice that you described, even as we feel worthless, it means that there's still something you value that was under threat. And that fear is a virtue. in this case. It's a virtue that saved your life. That's the survival function of fear, right? Inside Out was absolutely right. Fear keeps us alive. It protects us from threats. And that's the irony of this notion that it was cowardice that saves a life. It was fear saving a life in a healthy way because we still value life. It still matters. And just as you described what saved you, that's what Syl is able to do with Kaladin. He had gotten to a point where he did not value his own life. And as he comes back to Gaz and says, you know what? I died and you have to deal with my vengeful ghost. Mm-hmm. I love that line. But there's this moment where Syl realizes, I'm not going to get him to value himself yet. But because, and this is why I love the chapter that came before, it teaches us about the good things that Lirin did to instill in Kaladin. A fundamental care for humanity, a fundamental virtue to serve and help others if you can, no matter how hard or uncomfortable it is. He wraps himself in the warm blanket of responsibility. In my notes, I have it in all caps, goosebumps. The candle of hope reignites as Syl gives Kaladin a purpose. He realized, I was crying last night because I saw a young boy die. He wasn't crying at his own misfortune. He was crying because of a boy that he didn't know died and reminded him of his brother. And he's realizing, I still care about people. He's acquired the capability for himself to go, but he still cares about helping others. And Syl lights that flame. I love that.
Speaking about self-help and this whole podcast, Stephen, if you wanted to start, what was your reason for living then when you had that attempt?
This attempt was in high school. I've had suicidal ideation much more recently, but this was my one attempt. And the reason why I kept on, apart from the feeling of cowardice and fear that I just couldn't go through with it, the reason why I allowed myself to give into that cowardice, I guess, was there were people that needed me. I was heavily involved in band and in drama in high school. And I guess that replaceability that Kaladin is feeling was not present in me. Like if I was gone, then there would be a hole in the orchestration. Mm-hmm. There would be a part of that music that was missing. That involvement, that community that I had where I was a necessary part to bring about this communal product, that I think helped a lot. I wasn't just a cog in the machine, I was a part of the music. And recognizing my own importance in that as a part of the symphony of life that all of us participate in is essential. It reminds me of a quote that I gave to myself. I had a dream. I can't remember what exactly was going on in this dream at all anymore, but I said this quote in my dream: you have the melody here, and you need to make it shine. And we, as members of the human race, we all have the melody for the symphony of life in our own lives. And making sure that we are able to contribute to that symphony, because we are an irreplaceable part of the music, where if we are gone, part of the melody is missing. And staying in the music, making sure other people can hear our voice and our song is essential, because we have the capacity to change others' lives by being still in our own.
I think that's a beautiful way to place it. I think it's also very telling that you and me are going to become friends, Stephen. might even end up doing karate in the garage. Who knows?
Hey.
I was thinking the same thing in that symphony of life and how you are the conductor of your own sound. That symphony is not complete without your sound in it. But that's beautiful.
The powerful play goes on and we can contribute a verse.
Mm. I just love how you put that, like, especially where it started was literally, right? You realize my voice literally needs to be heard in this music, and then connecting it to metaphorically, it is no less true. It's absolutely true. And that is powerful stuff right there. In Thomas Joyner, his theory that when asked, so what do you do if you're afraid that a friend if you know a friend is thinking about suicide, Joyner argues that telling them that you love them is not nearly as powerful as telling them you need them. And that's what you talked about, that people have to feel like they have a role, and they do.
I want to bring up one more thing, something that I experienced, not with this specific suicide attempt, but just with ideation that I have repeatedly had over the past few years. When you call the suicide hotline, they check for certain things to see like how close you are to suicide, right?
Yeah, it's called the Columbia Severity Suicidality Rating Scale.
What is that?
We actually use it for our work. I find myself giving it to myself because, like you, Stephen, I deal with a chronic suicidality. For me, it really comes out in when I start getting angry about things for whatever reason. But I don't know how often you deal with it, Ben.
I've not formally used the Columbia scale. I've used my own informal suicide assessment.
Okay.
But it's ideation, explicit thoughts, a plan, means, intent, and then when.
So it's first question, over the past month, have you wished you were dead or wished you could go to sleep and not wake up? And the second one is, over the past month, have you had an actual thoughts of killing yourself? And depending on your answer, so if the person answers yes, that's where you would move on to the third question. Over the past month, have you been thinking about how you might do this? The fourth question, over the past month, have you had these thoughts and had some intention on acting on them, like Ben, you just said? And then 5, over the past month, have you started to work out or worked out the details of how you would kill yourself? And if that's a yes, then you move on to the other questions, 6 and 7. At this time in the past month, did you intend to carry out this plan? And then in your lifetime, have you ever done anything or started to do anything or prepared to do anything to end your life? But yes, that's what you're referencing. Most crisis lines use that. So, I mean, for anyone watching, listening, they're most likely going to ask you those. It's kind of like the gold standard usually for crisis intervention. But we also use it for our case study I mentioned last episode. We kind of attributed points to each question, just used the 5 main questions. And that's how we kind of figured out our 75% reduction was that veterans were coming to us, say 5 out of 5, and then they were leaving us a 0 out of 5 or 1 out of 5. It's not the best way to do it, but it's what kind of worked for us, and it's what has been working for us.
Well, I am acknowledging here in relation to those 3 components of suicidality, is the thwarted belongingness, the perceived burdensomeness, and the acquired capability. With my suicide attempt, I didn't have the capability. And with my more recent just suicidal ideation, it's been an acknowledgement of the burdensomeness that would happen after that has kept me from moving forward with planning or things like that. There's an inherent burden in suicide, especially if you have people that you care about. And using that burden, trying to not burden others to prevent suicide, I think is something that should be acknowledged. Where I didn't want my family to have to plan a funeral or to have to go through the pain of finding my body and needing to take care of that. There are sometimes small things that can keep you alive, and not wanting to be a burden, which is a huge, potentially negative thing in my life. But in certain moments, that has not necessarily saved my life because I wasn't actively attempting suicide, but focusing on the love that I have for others and not wanting to make their life worse by me leaving it. Even though sometimes I do feel that not being a part of their life would be an improvement, getting to that point would be incredibly burdensome and painful for people that I love. And that has kept me from moving forward. I think even though that's something that I'm working on in other aspects of my life where I am allowed to be a burden on people, acknowledging those times where I don't want to be a burden has been very beneficial to me.
I mean, that is like one of my main reasons for living is trauma should not be inherited. I've personally have had to deal with death way too often in my life, whether it was my wife and I's our daughter, my parents, my friends, the military kind of adds to that as well. In no way, shape, or form. It's trauma shouldn't be inherited. And that's my number one thing. But there's so many other different reasons. And I'm glad we're talking about it because I think it's also important to realize that once you realize you're not alone, I think that's a big deal too. And that these feelings, the thoughts that we have are not so uncommon. They're incredibly common. And it's when we latch onto the belongingness, when we latch onto the, not isolating ourselves, is when those reasons start to pile up and become a mountain of just life in general. Or they become, like you said, a symphony.
I think what you guys are saying is so powerful, and it teaches important lessons here that, as you talk about that trauma should not be inherited. I don't want to pass this pain on in these powerful ways. And similarly, Steve, where you're talking about, even if I believe that my absence might make their life easier, getting there is unacceptable in terms of what it would put them through. Sounds a lot like saying my destination isn't as important as how I get there, as the journey. And recognizing the steps that I'm taking. Recognizing as well that when we're in these dark places and people say, oh, you're not a burden, our mind is so ready to turn that away. Or when people say that people would be devastated if you died, well, now I'm saying, well, yeah, I don't want to make them devastated. But then we'll still start to rationalize in our head that down the road, it'll still be better for them. And so that's why what Syl is doing is so powerful. And what we can do with ourselves is to say, well, if I feel like a burden, and I don't want to put them through that, then the next step can be, or the next ideal, well, then what can I do to help? What can I do? And if we're concerned about our friends, instead of just saying you're not a burden, to help them and help us see the impact that we have in everybody's lives. Because when we're in this dark place, because I'm assuming that none of us are actually bridgemen, but we have a mindset of a bridgeman sometimes because we feel so discouraged. And the solution isn't saying what we're not. It is helping us to see that we do have an impact, that there are differences that we make, that we do contribute to the symphony, that we're not just silent, and to help people see and feel meaningful opportunities for contribution, to feel like I'm making a difference. That is one of the most powerful things for us to recover and to help others.
The thing I love about what Syl does in finding Kaladin at the honor chasm, it's not just that she comes up and says, hey, you do matter, you are valued. She comes up with a specific thing. It's not just a general platitude. It's a, hey, you and I have this connection, and I saw you value this. It's poison, unbeknownst to her, but it's something that she saw Kaladin value, and she brings that to Kaladin, saying, hey, this specific thing is something I know that you have wanted. And so I am going to bring this specific thing to you because I think it will help. Not a general platitude, not you got this, buddy, clap him on the shoulder.
Right.
It's a specific marker of their connection and their relationship that brings Kaladin out of it.
Communicates, I see you, not just as another bridgeman, but I know who you are. And that's the other thing we haven't even talked about. We've talked about the importance of names in previous episodes. The first thing, he is about to step off.
Foot off the ledge.
Yep.
She uses his name. Not Lordling, not Bridgeboy, Kaladin. I know who you are, and if you don't believe me, I got you that leaf you loved. At great personal struggle, I went and got you this leaf that you loved. That's incredible. And that communicates so much.
The entire scene is incredible. I mean, it's so apt. It's just so, I don't know, perfect in its execution. So important. I think about, I'm a big audiobook guy, graphic audio guy, as well as a reader, and hearing it while driving. I remember me having to pull over to kind of let the tears out, because you hear like the way it is in the book is, or in the audiobook is like, it has her voice very, very low, and it kind of builds up and builds up and builds up, and then she's there, and just it hit on so many different levels. The dark humor of it hit me on my military level on so many, where I'm like, oh my God, that's hilarious. She brought in the thing that can kill him, and so great. Everything. And I think it's even returning from that, Kaladin comes back with, Gaz calls him the coward and blanket of responsibility. I think it's for the military. He returned with purpose, or a goal in mind, an ideal in mind, an oath in mind. And that's ultimately, I feel like, what kept him from suicide. And looking at it with my military brain, when someone leaves the military, and Kaladin was really forced out of the military into this, cannon fodder squad, you experience 3 losses immediately upon getting out. You You're losing the friends that you served with and the people that were to your left and to your right. You're losing your purpose. It's a huge part of it, losing your purpose. And you're losing your identity, where it's like, well, what am I if I'm not a soldier? What am I if I'm not a squad leader, or I'm not a spearman, or I'm not a this? It's like, oh, well, I guess I'm a bridgeman. I think that's kind of the analogy. I think at least that's what I made when I first got out. We're talking, I've been working with vets for a little over a decade now, and I got out of the military in 2013, but it was absolutely true then, and it's still true now. So Kaladin finding that purpose, and all too often with the veterans I work with, is once they find that purpose, that's where like, oh, I finally have a purpose. Now I can take responsibility. Now I can make the hard choices. Now I can start doing this and this because I have this overarching purpose. And without Syl, Kaladin would have never found it. Without hearing his name, without that black bane leaf, none of the story as we know it would happen.
One of my favorite quotes from Syl is when she comes and is talking to Kaladin, and he says that nothing he does matters, that everything he has attempted previously has failed. Everything I touch withers and dies, he says. He said, it's too late, I've failed, they're dead, they're all going to die, there's no way out. And she says, what's one more try then? What could it hurt? In moments where I have considered suicide, those rock bottom moments where I have felt like everything I do doesn't work, and anything that I try is not going to be effective. That thought, that challenge that Syl says, what's one more try? If it's not going to work, well, why not do it? If it isn't going to work, then give it a shot anyway, right? The fact that there is a possibility of improvement through effort means effort is worth it. There's a quote from Henry David Thoreau that I love that has helped me through some really difficult times. He says, I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life by conscious endeavor. And that is beautifully reflected in Syl's challenge to Kaladin of what's one more try. Because if you consciously choose to attempt to better your life, no question, that is possible. That can be done. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life through conscious endeavor. If we attempt, we can succeed. It's like Yalb said in the previous chapter to Shallan, you win when you need it most.
Yes.
So keep trying.
She alleviates some of that perceived burdensomeness. She says, listen, you're not going to make their life worse, but you might be able to make their life better.
Yeah.
And it gives him this opportunity, that purpose, that with conscientious endeavor, with your effort, you can still make a difference. And that's when we're talking to people who are struggling, and when we're looking at ourselves struggling, sometimes we think that optimism is just the end. Like you just need to hope for something better. And that's not usually really what keeps us alive. Sometimes it's that belief that things are better elsewhere that hurts so much. It's not that your life's going to get better, Kaladin. You're still going to be a bridge man, but you might be able to make their life better. That's what his turning point is meaning through that immediate responsibility. So one other thing that I think was interesting is that the warm blanket of responsibility is another reason why I think we have the Lirin chapter, the flashback, because responsibility is how Lirin communicates love. He isn't a warm and fuzzy father. His love language is taking responsibility and teaching. I think that is a big part of why that's what's comforting to Cal.
Not just taking responsibility. The way Lirin communicates love to Kaladin is by giving responsibility.
Yes.
Is by giving Kaladin a place to be and a thing to do that will concretely impact his situation and people around him. That's why at the end of that chapter, we didn't mention this last episode, but Lirin says that he wants Kaladin to travel to Kharbranth to become a surgeon, training that Lirin never got. He had been to Kharbranth, but as a courier. Lirin wants his son to get a further training and become a more skilled surgeon than Lirin ever has been, ever would have the capacity to be. And giving Kaladin that purpose, that place to exercise responsibility, is what really instilled in Kaladin this desire, this almost need to be responsible for those around him. And it's once Syl comes in at the honor chasm and says, you can be responsible. You have the capacity to influence and better the lives of these men. That's when Kaladin shifts and turns away from the honor chasm.
Just getting goosebumps thinking about it and picturing it.
I know. And gosh, I'm thinking about just all the different, just the masterpiece of writing that is occurring at this time. Because if things had played out differently, theoretically, Kaladin and Shallan would have been in Kharbranth together at the same time.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely true.
Just how it's such a small world, and different, talking about like people and how they deal with different issues that come up in their life, or problems, or things that just seem like insurmountable weights or mountains to climb. I think it's, I don't know, important to remember that so much of what we have is shared, and that's only through communicating what's going on with us that maybe we find that other person that has that similar experience or has had that similar feeling, to where you're like, oh, you know what, I'm not alone. That's huge. In terms of wellness in general, that's huge. And yeah, this whole chapter, though, is just, it always gets me going, always gets me crying.
So the last pieces of this chapter that are, again, masterful writing, I remember just feeling this surge of motivation. Reading this chapter reminds me, this might get cut out too, reminds me of the first time I saw Batman Begins. I wanted to swing off rooftops after watching Batman Begins for the first time. I was like, I can do anything. And that's what I'm feeling as Kaladin goes into the barracks and forces Teft to tell him his name. And he goes from one to the next. They all resist. They all are feeling what he has felt. They are all feeling the futility of relationships, the danger of relationships. Kaladin is tenacious. And when he commits, he goes all in. And I love this, where you're just like, he has changed. I love this paragraph. Kaladin was the one who had changed, not they. He reached back across time, studying the man he had been, the man who'd still fought and fought well. He couldn't be that man again. He couldn't erase the scars, but he could learn from that man, as a new squad leader learned from the victorious generals of the past. Kaladin Stormbest was dead, but Kaladin Bridgeman was of the same blood, a descendant with potential. Oh! Yeah, I mean, there are times where in my journals, I'll refer to periods of my life where I look back and think that Ben was so much better than me. And I am so focused on the weaknesses and the things that I've struggled with. And I wish I could be like him. And when I read that, I'm reminded, no, I am still him. Mm-hmm. Even if I'm a descendant with potential. Man, it's so motivating.
Something else I wanted to talk about, the quote you had mentioned, Stephen, conscious endeavor. I think, having witnessed plenty of wellness journeys, Ben, I know you can probably attribute it, Stephen, I'm sure you've seen it as well. Conscientious endeavor doesn't have to be something huge. It doesn't have to be getting my doctorate or getting my master's. It can be making sure I showered today. It can be, like, because sometimes I know, God, I've gotten there myself in the deepest, darkest pits of despair and depression, where it's just like, I don't even feel like getting clean. It can be just trying to shower and eat for the day. That's okay. Build up to it. With Kaladin, he came back with purpose. He didn't have a plan, but he had a purpose, which is a great starting point. And I think he eventually, trying to keep it spoiler free, that purpose also is fragile. I mean, he just got interrupted from trying to kill himself. Now he's back here with purpose. It's like complete 180, but that can be fragile. I think he's going about it the right way, and purpose is awesome, but add some stuff to it.
You said it's fragile. And again, Brandon puts it well here. He talks about how he held to it like a climber clinging to his last handhold as he dangled from a cliffside. It's not suddenly life is, right. He's untouchable, right? But he had something. And I love that he goes to names. It says that he clutched those names like precious gemstones. The names mattered. The men mattered. Mm-hmm. And that's his purpose, is that people matter. That's what Nerd HQ and Dragonsteel are trying to do with the next step, is to help everybody recognize you matter. You matter. You are a part of the symphony. Your voice is useful. Your voice is needed. Every voice is needed, not just loved, but needed and essential. And that's why we challenge each other to commit to being a part of the symphony, commit to being a part of this life and sharing what you have.
I love how you mentioned, Pat, sometimes the next step is tiny things. It doesn't have to be a giant shift or accomplishment. the next step sometimes is just what's one tiny thing you can do to take care of yourself right now.
Yeah.
I have been in situations where I don't want to take care of myself because I don't feel that I am worth taking care of. And taking that next step of, no, what is one tiny thing like showering or getting a drink of water or putting on deodorant or a clean shirt, that can be the next step sometimes.
100%.
And that's again, one reason why I love this coin from Dragonsteel is that reminder of we commit to take the next step. With that coin, Brandon sends out the letter that he has signed, that you sign along with him, to commit to always take the next step forward and reach out when you need help and do those little things that sometimes we have zero desire to do, but we know we need to do. Committing to take those tiny next steps, because that brings us forward. That gets us closer to the person that we want to be. When we don't know where that person is, Nerd HQ is partnering with Dragonsteel to provide that help, to help people get the guidance and the direction that they need by providing free mental health services, free therapy services to people who can't afford them. Even if you can, going and checking out the Nerd HQ website has tons of resources and really interesting like articles and community boards and places where people can interact and make those connections with each other to have that motivation to keep taking those next steps. Even if you are in your own therapy or if you have a way to get therapy, because everyone should do therapy. Therapy's great.
It's also not a life sentence, though.
True. It's a resource.
Yes.
Even if you have that resource in your life already, there are other things that are worth checking out to help other people. So if you have the next step coin, blip that QR code on the back and go check out the resources on Brandon's website. Go check out the resources at Nerd HQ, because if you don't need to use them for yourself, they're worth checking out for others, because we all can be sills in other people's lives, and we can provide those connections, those specific moments that help people pull back from that very inappropriately named honor chasm, because we need everyone here.
100 emoji. The last thing that I hope people take away from this, particularly if you're feeling like the only thing keeping you alive is cowardice. That stuck with me, Steve, that point. Sometimes when we have that belief, to seek help feels like it's also shameful because it's just something to keep me away from that courageous act. But I would say the opposite is true, that seeking help takes a lot of courage. And that's why it's such an unfortunate lie that we can feel trapped by in these scenarios that Kaladin can be in and that all of us can fall into. But that the true courageous act is the one that reaches out and says, I need help. I want to stick around. That takes courage. And to ask for that help and then that next step, what role can I play in other people's lives? Yes, we need to take care of ourselves. But one of the ways that we take care of ourselves is by recognizing what we have to offer the world around us.
It's a fantastic point. Asking for help and acknowledging that you need the help is such an immense next step, but it is absolutely worth taking.
So in relation to that, what are our next ideals from this episode?
As we've talked, a friend of mine has come to mind many times who is a fan of the Cosmere, and I've been concerned about. I'm going to see if he's heard of the next step coin. I'm going to reach out explicitly and find out if he's heard of it. And if he hasn't, order one for him.
I love the fact that Syl brought something specific, symbolizing her relationship, her connection with Kaladin. I want to, because of this chapter, be more specific in my interactions with people, especially people that I care about and people that I'm concerned about. She calls him by name. I'm going to more intentionally use people's names, recognizing their importance as individuals and highlighting the connection and the relationships that I have with people. I'm going to call people by name.
I think for me, one of my big mantras is progress, not perfection. On that same token, I learned years ago in the military, basic training, they talk about when you're digging your foxhole, to always improve that position. And that's something I brought into my life that I feel like lately I've forgotten. So I guess my next ideal is to remember to always improve my position and see what I can do with my position to then help the positions of the other people I know and I care about. So I think that's where I'm at. Improve my position.
Awesome. Gentlemen, thank you. This has been a powerful conversation, particularly Pat. Thanks for joining us as a special guest. This is, when Steve and I first started talking about guest hosts, I said, you know what, when we get to Honor Chasm, there's this guy I met at Dragonsteel I did a panel with, and he would be perfect. I'm so appreciative of all that you brought to our conversation today.
It was an honor. I really hope this takes off for you guys. It is such a pleasure to just be able to talk about this. Going back to like what we were talking about, people are like, oh, well, the book's too long. And that's exactly what the guys that work for me said, because I had included them in my book group and was going to do it at work. And they're like, even getting paid, they didn't finish the book. So it's like I've been itching, to get this out and to talk about this stuff. And so it was just perfect timing.
Excellent. Well, I definitely hope that this podcast is of value to listeners, that they can see themselves reflected in these books, because I know I do. I have found my own experiences shown to me through the mirror of fiction and have seen myself and my experiences validated and supported in this text. So I definitely hope that listeners are able to get support and comfort from the things we talk about. If listeners are a fan of this podcast and want to support it in a different way, we do have a Patreon that you can join. Supporters at the Patreon have access to all of our episodes that are recorded to that point. So you get episodes potentially a month or so in advance. If you want to get ahead of where we are with our published episodes, Patreon supporters get early access to all of the episodes, as well as clips from episodes that we have had to cut for time or spoiler reasons. I know in these specific episodes, we've had some interesting conversations that most listeners won't be able to get because we're wanting to do a spoiler-free read-along podcast. But if you are caught up with the Cosmere, come support us on Patreon and listen to the other interesting points that we talk about that we can't include. If you are also wanting to support mental health in the Cosmere in a more general capacity, we have linked on our website under the resources page the Cosmere Nerds for Mental Health Ko-Fi, which is a community page where every donation, every cent of every dollar that gets donated on that Ko-Fi goes directly to Nerd HQ to help pay for therapy for members of the Cosmere community. So if you want to contribute to that, there is also other early access or exclusive access content from a bunch of other content creators in the Cosmere community that could be a fun thing to participate in. We're releasing early access to episodes on that as well, and we would love to have you as part of those communities so we can keep on working on those next ideals. Also, thank you for joining the episodes. We want to specifically say thank you to Revelry Play, who is a member of our highest tier Patreon supporters.
Thank you, Revelry Play.
Yes.
Appreciate it. We really appreciate it.